Just before Memorial Day weekend, when nobody was paying attention, the president unveiled his regulatory agenda, which included an executive action known as Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. If you don't remember, it's an effort by the administration to essentially force suburban neighborhoods to construct affordable housing for low-income families. I recently spoke with Stanley Kurtz, a National Review columnist and author of Spreading the Wealth, How Obama's Robbing the Suburbs to Pay for the Cities, about this. Check it out. I thought, and maybe I'm crazy, that urban progressive politicians have figured everything out. If they've solved the problem of unemployment and unaffordable housing, why would they need to co-opt the suburbs into this?
Well, Andrew, thanks so much for having me. First of all, you know, there's a misconception in what Housing Secretary Sean Donovan said, and I think it's shared by many urban politicians, and that is that people are overwhelmingly affected by the place in which they live. The truth is, this is a misunderstanding of the American dream. What makes the American dream work is not that you pick someone up and plop them down in a suburb. It's that they spend years scrimping and saving, living a life of motivation and discipline, and finally save up that money and do the work that lets them buy their dream house out in the suburbs where they can raise their kids. It's all the things it takes to get you to the suburbs that really involve the American dream. You can't just grab someone and plop them down somewhere and think that all of a sudden you're going to be creating the middle class. It's not where you live, it's how you live.
You know, I want to be clear, we're not saying urban politician as code talk for black politicians. Bill de Blasio is one of these guys. Urban politicians, no matter what their race is, they're progressive Democrats. They have done everything in their power to run manufacturing out of their cities. They've done everything in their power to make education and housing more expensive through taxes and redistribution. It's no wonder why, as we conservatives always say, whenever the government meddles with these things, it always hurts the poor the most.
Well, that's right, Andrew. There's something else going on here as well. President Obama and people like Sean Donovan, who propagated this affirmatively furthering fair housing rule, believe in something called regionalism. This is the idea that individual municipalities, cities, or suburbs shouldn't have control over their own localities, but regions as a whole should do this. Now, there are a lot of minority communities that don't like regionalism at all. Because everyone, regardless of their color or ethnicity, wants local control. This is a classic American value, and a lot of ethnic groups and racial groups who come and live in large numbers in a certain place say, hey, we want to control our lives just like anyone else would say. So actually the left is split on the kind of issues that we're talking about here, and this is one of the reasons the Obama administration doesn't like to publicize its plans, because its regionalist agenda really cuts against the interests of everyone, regardless of ethnicity or race.
Here's the other funny thing. Many municipalities have tried to build new high-rise, multi-purpose buildings, you know, apartments on top of shopping malls and that sort of thing, and then in comes the EPA and says, you can't dig a hole here. Now they're saying from HUD, you have to dig a hole here. So the hole you were going to dig before was unenvironmental and therefore not allowed. The hole you have to dig is all of a sudden magically environmental and it's mandatory.
Well, that's right, Andrew. And the interesting thing about this affirmatively furthering fair housing rule is it isn't really just about low-income housing. It has this very ambitious regionalist agenda behind it. The idea here is that America should become more urban, that suburbs should become more like cities, and cities should become more like Manhattan. And so what this rule does is to go far beyond the idea of discrimination and to redefine fair housing as, hey, you can't have fair housing unless your housing is near a transportation stop. You can't have fair housing unless it's near a densely packed downtown with a lot of jobs. So using this rule, the government is going to be able to essentially force cities and suburbs to build these dense little mini Manhattans where people get herded. And they're going to use environmental regulations to try to push people in this direction. But as you suggest, they can use these environmental justifications for almost anything. And what they're really after is to push people into a more dense living style, to get them out of their cars and force them to walk to subways to go to work instead of driving on their own.
You know, basically it seems like between the love affair with amnesty and this program, they're basically saying, look, we as a nation have had it far too good for too long, and you people in the burbs, you've had it way too good for too long. So everyone's going to have to tuck their arms in and live with a little less space and a little more congestion, although we'll figure out a way to green it, and that's what's fair. Except this is never going to follow the political class to where they live, the country clubs, their big mansions in and around D.C. The people that tell you to get used to something are the ones who never get used to it.
I think that's right, Andrew, and it's also just fundamentally at odds with the American principle of freedom. I mean, let's just get down to the basics. I mean, America was founded by people who wanted to live somewhere else, to move somewhere else, and then we went out west, then we started moving to the suburbs, and the idea is you move to where you want to live, and then you create your own government. You govern yourself with the people who live in your area. And what this is really trying to do is to run from the center of the country where people live, to cut against our most basic traditions of local government.
Can we just be honest with ourselves here? I mean, I live in New Jersey, where we have the Coalition of Affordable Housing. The Democrats figured out very quickly that they win certain areas with like 95% of the vote. You only got to win by 51%. If you can force, through the federal government, red counties, red townships, to build these housing units, and you can bring people who vote your way into somebody else's territory, you're going to affect local elections. And Julian Castro, who I have been saying for the longest time is the Democrat to watch in 2016, he's going to be in charge of all of this.
Well, that's right, Andrew. Julian Castro has just been nominated to take over for Sean Donovan as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And my thought is that this would really be a great opportunity during Julian Castro's confirmation hearings to bring some of these issues out in the open. The Obama administration, as you pointed out at the beginning, really doesn't want to talk about its regionalist policies. So I would recommend that senators on the Hill, when they're questioning Julian Castro, raise these questions. What about this affirmatively furthering fair housing regulation? How are you going to enforce it? What are you going to do to try to undercut city governments? Are you really going to try to press people into this dense housing? What about the Sustainable Communities Initiative, another one of these regionalist programs no one knows about because it's got a name that sounds like gobbledygook? All this stuff should be put onto the table and forced into the public debate. And since Julian Castro is potentially, everyone buzzes about, a possible vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, I think it would bring enough attention to the hearings that we could get a national debate on this. I mean, whether you agree or disagree with the administration's policies, this is such a potentially transformative issue that it deserves a national debate, and we just haven't been having one.
All right, thank you again to Stanley Kurtz for joining me. Coming up,